The galaxy had never seen anything fall so fast. In 17 days, the Veltari Dominion swept through human space like a plague of metal and fire. They took everything. Station after station, fortress after fortress, world after world. The alien commanders laughed at how easy it was. They called humans the soft species, the weak ones, the ones who would break. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance and watched the last transmission from Fortress Meridian. The signal cut to static. Another stronghold gone. Another 1,000 soldiers captured or killed. The weight of it pressed down on her chest like a physical force. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all knew what had happened. The Veltari had taken 14 major strongholds in less than 3 weeks. These were not small outposts. These were the heart of human defense. Massive orbital stations armed with weapons that could crack moons. Ground fortresses built into the cores of planets. Shield networks that had stood for 200 years. All of them fell. The Imperial Council called an emergency session on Earth. Politicians screamed at each other. Generals pointed fingers. Citizens rioted in the streets of major cities. Fear spread faster than any disease. People said the war was over. They said humanity should surrender. They said there was no point in fighting an enemy this powerful. Helena Cross did not attend the council meeting. She had more important work to do. While politicians argued, she gathered every ship that could still fly. She pulled captains from retirement. She armed merchant vessels with military weapons. She conscripted civilian pilots and gave them 3 days of combat training. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. But it was what she had. The Veltari Dominion controlled 14 strongholds now. Their fleet was spread across human space, confident in their victory. Their high commander, a creature named Zervaxis, sent a message to Earth. He demanded complete surrender. He gave humanity 1 week to comply. He said resistance would result in the extinction of the species. Helena Cross sent back a 2-word reply. It was not polite. The first attack came at night cycle on Station Karis. The Veltari had converted it into a forward operating base. 300 alien warships sat in defensive formation around the station. They had disabled the human weapons and replaced them with their own. The alien soldiers inside felt safe. They had already won. What could the defeated humans possibly do? The answer came in the form of 67 small ships, dropping out of hyperspace at impossible angles. They appeared inside the defensive formation, not outside it. It was a maneuver that should have been suicide. The Veltari scanners barely had time to register the contacts before the first missiles hit. Helena had studied the Veltari for months. She knew their weakness. They relied on long-range sensors and shield technology. They never expected anyone to get close. Their ships were powerful but slow to turn. Their crews were trained for bombardment, not close combat. She planned to use every single one of those weaknesses. The 67 human ships split into 17 attack groups. Each group targeted specific enemy vessels. They did not try to destroy them. They flew past at close range and launched boarding pods directly into the alien hulls. The pods carried 5 soldiers each. These soldiers had volunteered knowing they would probably not survive. They went anyway. Inside the Veltari ships, chaos erupted. Human soldiers fought through corridors designed for aliens twice their size. They moved fast. They stayed together. They used explosives without hesitation. The Veltari had never faced this kind of attack. Their doctrine assumed enemies would fight at a distance. They had no training for close-quarters combat against a species that refused to die. Helena watched the battle unfold from the Vengeance. She stayed outside the combat zone, coordinating the assault. Her voice remained calm. Her orders were precise. When the first Veltari ship went dark, she allowed herself a small smile. The battle for Station Karis lasted 6 hours. By the end, 214 alien ships were destroyed or captured. The station was back in human hands. The cost was high. 31 human ships lost, 800 soldiers dead, but they had won. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had won. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The humans had retaken a stronghold. The unbeatable aliens had been beaten. On Earth, the riots turned into celebrations. Volunteers flooded military recruitment centers. Factories that had shut down reopened at double capacity. The species that was supposed to surrender had found its anger instead. Helena did not celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning. 13 strongholds remained in enemy hands. The Valkyrie would not underestimate them twice. The next battles would be harder. She would lose more ships and more soldiers. She would make decisions that would haunt her forever. But she would not stop. The second target was Fortress Draconis, a ground installation on a moon with no atmosphere. The Valkyrie had turned it into a prison camp. 12,000 human soldiers were held inside, waiting for execution or slavery. Helena could not leave them there. She would not leave them there. The attack on Draconis required a different strategy. The fortress was underground, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. A direct assault would fail. So Helena chose an indirect one. She sent a team of 20 specialists to the moon 3 days before the main attack. They landed on the far side and walked across the surface in vacuum suits. It took them 18 hours to reach the fortress. The specialists found a maintenance shaft that led into the lower levels. The Valkyrie had not guarded it because they did not believe any species would be crazy enough to use it. The shaft was 200 meters of vertical tunnel with no handholds and no safety systems. The specialists climbed it anyway. Inside the fortress, they moved like ghosts. They disabled communication relays. They poisoned water supplies. They planted explosives in ammunition storage. They freed prisoners and armed them with stolen weapons. By the time the main fleet arrived, the fortress was already in chaos. Helena led the ground assault personally. She landed with the first wave of troops and fought her way through alien defenders who were already confused and demoralized. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it ended, Fortress Draconis was human again. 9,000 prisoners were freed. The other 3,000 had been killed by the Valkyrie before the rescue could reach them. Helena stood in the ruins of the command center and looked at the bodies. Human bodies. Soldiers who had trusted their leaders to save them. She had not been fast enough. She had not been good enough. She memorized their faces before ordering her troops to continue. The campaign continued for 7 months. Each stronghold presented unique challenges. Station Prometheus required a 3-week siege. The Valkyrie had fortified it so heavily that direct assault was impossible. Helena blockaded the station and waited. She intercepted supply ships. She jammed communications. She let hunger and fear do the work that weapons could not. When the Valkyrie commander finally surrendered, he asked how humans could be so patient. He said his species never waited for anything. They took what they wanted immediately. Helena told him that patience was not the same as weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was wait. Fortress Achilles fell after a boarding action that lasted 48 hours of continuous fighting. Station Orion was retaken through a surprise attack using asteroids as cover. The Valkyrie never expected ships to hide inside space debris. They learned that humans would hide anywhere. The 9th stronghold was different. The Valkyrie High Commander Zervaxis was there personally. He had 500 warships under his direct command. His flagship, the Eternal Victory, was the largest vessel in the Dominion fleet. Helena knew that defeating him would break the back of the invasion. She also knew that a direct assault against those odds was impossible. Helena gathered her captains and presented a plan that most of them called insane. She would take a small group of ships directly to the enemy flagship. She would challenge Zervaxis to single combat. In Velthari culture, refusing such a challenge meant eternal disgrace. The alien commander would have to accept. Her officers argued against it. They said she was too valuable to risk. They said the Velthari would cheat. They said it was suicide. Helena listened to all of them. Then she boarded a shuttle and flew toward the enemy fleet alone. Zervaxis accepted the challenge. He was curious about this human who had caused so much trouble. He wanted to see for himself what made her different. He met her on a neutral platform between the two fleets. He towered over her, 3 meters of armored scales and muscle. He carried a weapon that could cut through starship hulls. Helena carried a knife. The fight lasted 11 minutes. Zervaxis was stronger, faster, and better armed. Helena was smaller, weaker, and equipped with a blade that barely scratched his armor. None of that mattered. She had studied every recording of Velthari combat she could find. She knew how they moved. She knew where their armor was weakest. She knew that they always attacked with full strength because they had never needed to conserve energy. She let him tire himself out. She dodged and ran and refused to engage directly. The Velthari commander grew frustrated. His strikes became wild. His breathing grew heavy. When he finally overextended on a killing blow, Helena was ready. She drove her knife into the gap between his helmet and chest plate. The blade severed something important. Zervaxis fell. His last words were a question. He asked how a creature so small could defeat him. Helena did not answer. She simply walked back to her shuttle and returned to her fleet. The remaining Velthari forces surrendered within the day. Without their high commander, they had no leadership. Without leadership, they had no will to fight. The 5th, 6th, 7th strongholds fell without major battles. The aliens simply left. The final stronghold was Citadel Prime, the first installation the Velthari had captured. It had been the headquarters of human defense. Retaking it would be a symbol. Helena ordered every available ship to the assault. The battle lasted 3 days. The Velthari defenders fought with the desperation of those who knew they had already lost. They caused heavy casualties. They destroyed dozens of human ships. They killed thousands of soldiers, but they could not win. They had never been able to win. They just did not know it yet. When the last alien ship was destroyed and the last enemy soldiers surrendered, Helena Cross stood on the command deck of Citadel Prime. The same deck where the war had started 7 months ago. The same deck where humanity had faced extinction. She looked out at the stars and thought about everything it had cost to reach this moment. The ships lost. The soldiers buried. The friends she would never see again. Victory was real, but it was not clean. It was not glorious. It was paid for in blood. A message arrived from Earth. The Imperial Council wanted her to return for a celebration. They wanted to make her a hero. They wanted parades and speeches and medals. Helena declined. She had more important work to do. The strongholds were back in human hands, but they needed to be rebuilt. The fleet needed repairs. The soldiers needed rest. The dead needed to be honored properly. She sat down at her command station and started writing orders. There was always more work to do. That was what it meant to be human. The galaxy learned something during those 7 months. They learned that humans were not the soft species. They were not the weak ones. They were not the ones who would break. When their strongholds fell, they did not surrender. They did not negotiate. They did not accept defeat. They came back. They fought. They won, and they would do it again if they had to.